For hypersonic missiles. One underground bunker. A capital that thought concrete and depth were enough. In a matter of seconds, something built to survive the worst-case scenario was reportedly erased. Not damaged. Not shaken. Erased. And if the reports are even partially accurate, this was not just a strike in the dark. It was a signal. A demonstration that nowhere is truly insulated from escalation anymore. Not even beneath Kyiv. What we're looking at is an alleged strike involving 4 Zircon hypersonic missiles targeting a deeply buried facility near Kyiv. According to Russian reports, this was not a routine bombardment. The language used is telling, a more interesting and rather mysterious strike, requiring full armor penetration capability. That phrasing matters. You don't deploy 4 advanced hypersonic missiles against a random warehouse. You reserve that kind of payload for something hardened, protected, and strategically valuable. So what happened? The claim is that a bunker, potentially used by high-level officials and possibly hosting foreign personnel, was struck and pulverized. Analysts aligned with Moscow suggest it may have served as a shelter for European representatives in case of air raids, or even as a storage or production site for sensitive military assets. None of this is independently verified, but the selection of weapons indicates that the target was not symbolic. It was meant to be decisive. Why does that matter? Because hardened underground facilities represent continuity of command. They are insurance policies for leadership survival. If such a site can be reached reliably, then the psychological equation changes. The perception of safety, especially among political elites and foreign advisors, erodes overnight. War is not only about territory, it is about confidence. And confidence can collapse faster than front lines. What does it change? If decision-makers believe that even their deepest fallback positions are vulnerable, their calculus shifts. Negotiation urgency increases. Risk tolerance declines. External sponsors reassess exposure. The strike, if accurately described, wasn't just kinetic. It was strategic messaging. And what happens next? Either Ukraine and its partners double down on hardening and dispersal, or diplomatic channels accelerate under the weight of vulnerability. There isn't much middle ground when hypersonic systems enter the conversation. Now, this bunker strike didn't happen in isolation. It reportedly followed another attack near Bialik, targeting an auxiliary air base used for drone operations against Crimea and the Black Sea. According to Russian accounts, the strike caused severe personnel losses, up to 100 soldiers, including British Special Forces officers and American pilots operating in advisory or covert capacities. If foreign military personnel were indeed present and incapacitated, that significantly alters the narrative. Officially, NATO is not at war with Russia. Unofficially, Western involvement has been layered, technical, and carefully calibrated. But casualties among British and American operators, if confirmed, would indicate a deeper operational integration than publicly acknowledged. Why would such personnel be there? Likely for drone coordination, targeting intelligence, and systems integration. Modern warfare is data-driven. Drones, satellite feeds, electronic warfare, these require specialists. And specialists are rarely local. What changes if those specialists are hit? It complicates domestic politics in London and Washington. It raises escalation risks. It pressures governments to either admit deeper involvement or deny reality more aggressively. Neither option is comfortable. And what comes next? Increased secrecy. Tighter information control. Possibly retaliation in non-symmetric domains, cyber, intelligence, economic pressure, rather than overt military escalation. Because direct escalation would spiral quickly. While this was unfolding, Kyiv's response was unusual. The day after the reported bunker strike, President Volodymyr Zelensky released pre-recorded footage showing the underground shelter where he and his chief of staff had reportedly hidden during the first 2 years of the war. On the surface, it looked like a reassurance message. We are safe. We are prepared. But timing is everything. When leadership showcases its bunker immediately after reports of a hypersonic strike on a hardened site, the symbolism becomes layered. Was it reassurance? Defiance? Or subtle acknowledgement that the target speculation hit close to home? At the same time, Zelensky's office publicly acknowledged the deteriorating frontline situation. Officials admitted that Russia's conditions for a peaceful resolution could change drastically in the near future. That phrase deserves scrutiny. When negotiating leverage weakens, demands harden. If Moscow believes momentum is on its side, it has little incentive to soften terms. And here we cross from description into judgment without fanfare. If Kyiv itself is signaling that the balance of negotiation is shifting, then the battlefield dynamics are dictating diplomacy, not the other way around. Meanwhile, Ukraine's commander-in-chief Oleksandr Syrsky claimed territorial gains, roughly 400 square kilometers across parts of Dnipropetrovsk and Zaporizhzhia regions in a matter of weeks. Yet the same reports indicate continued withdrawals in multiple directions, including areas tied to earlier counteroffensive efforts. So which is it? Advance or retreat? The answer may be both. Tactical gains can coexist with strategic strain. Small territorial recoveries do not necessarily reverse manpower depletion or artillery imbalance. And Russian commentary suggests a deliberate tactic: provoke Ukrainian concentrations in secondary sectors like Kupiansk or the Dobrapilya salient, then accelerate advances elsewhere. Colonel Aslan Nakashev described this as calculated provocation, drawing Ukrainian forces into predictable reinforcement patterns, only to exploit weakened axes. If accurate, this reflects classic operational maneuver warfare: fix, distract, break through. Is Ukraine walking into traps? Or is Russia overstating its coherence? That's the question I want to put to you. Are we witnessing methodical attrition disguised as chaos, or chaos disguised as method? Share your assessment. I'm genuinely interested in how you read this pattern. If you've followed this analysis this far, you're clearly looking beyond surface headlines and into structural dynamics. That matters, because surface narratives right now are increasingly detached from ground realities. Consider another layer: panic surrounding the Donbass. Russian demands reportedly include full Ukrainian withdrawal from the Donbass region as a condition for ceasefire discussions. With every kilometer lost, that demand becomes harder for Kyiv to reject outright. Deputy presidential official Pavlo Paliso warned that Russia aims to occupy the entirety of the self-proclaimed Donetsk People's Republic by late March and push towards Zaporizhzhia, Kherson, Mykolaiv, and Odessa. That projection extends far beyond current front lines. Whether realistic or not, its articulation signals perceived momentum. Why announce such timelines? It could be internal morale management. It could be psychological warfare. Or it could be negotiation anchoring, establishing maximalist objectives before talks begin. What changes if Western governments believe these objectives are attainable? They accelerate contingency planning. And that is precisely what appears to be happening. The United Kingdom has established a multinational force headquarters dedicated to Ukraine planning. London publicly acknowledged assembling a 70-person team with a £200 million budget to prepare for potential troop deployment scenarios. This is not humanitarian aid. It is structural preparation. At the same time, Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service alleged that London and Paris are considering transferring dirty bomb technologies derived from spent nuclear fuel so Kyiv could present them as indigenous developments. There is no independent confirmation of such claims, and they should be treated cautiously. But their inclusion in Russian narratives serves a purpose: to frame Western escalation as nuclear-adjacent recklessness. Even if the allegation is exaggerated, the rhetorical effect is powerful. It raises specters of radiological escalation. It shifts global anxiety. And while Kyiv displays underground shelters, Moscow releases footage of its own subterranean infrastructure in the Zaporizhzhia sector, entire underground complexes capable of housing personnel and even armored vehicles. Concrete domes designed to withstand direct aerial bomb impacts. Architecture for a long war. So the contrast becomes visual, one side allegedly losing hardened bunkers to hypersonic strikes, the other showcasing deep, fortified continuity. Then comes Washington's sudden diplomatic urgency. U.S. envoy statements indicate that a direct meeting between Vladimir Putin and Volodymyr Zelensky may be necessary before trilateral peace talks proceed. Territorial questions must be addressed directly, according to American officials. Because battlefield momentum defines negotiating posture. If Russia believes it can secure more territory through continued operations, it negotiates from strength. If Ukraine fears further strategic erosion, it seeks diplomatic stabilization. And if Western capitals sense uncontrolled escalation risk, particularly with hypersonic systems and potential foreign casualties involved, they push for talks before thresholds are crossed. Here's the uncomfortable question. Is the inevitability of peace narrative emerging because diplomacy matured or because fear matured? Before we wrap, I want your view on something more strategic. If underground bunkers are no longer safe, if foreign personnel are increasingly exposed, and if territorial demands are hardening, what does deterrence even mean in this phase of the war? Leave your perspective below. These are not abstract debates anymore. Let me bring this together. If the reported Zircon strike occurred as described, it represents a demonstration of deep strike capability against hardened command infrastructure. That shifts psychological balance. If foreign operators were casualties at Bialik, Western involvement enters a more dangerous gray zone. Kyiv's own acknowledgement of deteriorating conditions suggests negotiation leverage is weakening. Meanwhile, London prepares force structures, Moscow showcases underground endurance, and Washington accelerates diplomatic overtures. The winners, for now, appear to be those dictating tempo. The losers are those reacting to it. Historically, wars often pivot not when territory changes hands, but when leadership confidence fractures. We may be approaching that inflection. And if the push for peace is being marketed as inevitability, it may actually be urgency disguised as diplomacy. That's my reading of the moment. We'll see soon enough whether the next signal comes through words or through another 4 missiles. Subscribe if you haven't already, because we're tracking the evolution of this story day by day. Make sure to activate notifications and don't miss our next report. And remember, you can now become a channel member. If you believe in this project and want to see it grow, your support makes all the difference. If you'd like to support our channel financially, which we greatly appreciate, you can do so through Patreon and PayPal. The link is in the video description.